So, Dayshift at Freddy's, am I right? Yes, this is where I've been for the past few months. Why do you ask? For anyone who doesn't know what Dayshift at Freddy's is, it's a FNAF fan game by Direct Dogman, who is also the creator of Dialtown. Go play it on Steam. With 3 games in the series, made from 2016 to 2018. And a rather interesting storyline that goes with these games. The story follows Jack Kennedy, our protagonist and the character you play as, in his attempts to either free the souls of the dead kids or to join the purple guy, Dave Miller, in murdering kids. With Jack's behavior becoming progressively more concerning, to put it lightly, in the evil roots of the games as they progress. Throughout the games, we learn a lot about Jack and the other characters throughout the games, as well as what had led them to this point. One of the things we learn, Jack has a family, 2 siblings to be exact. It is one of those siblings we'll be discussing and analyzing today. Her name? Dee Kennedy. So who is Dee, and what's her whole deal? Well, that's what we're hopefully getting into today. To start off with, a very quick rundown of Dee, just in a nutshell. Dee Kennedy, as mentioned earlier, is Jack, the main character's younger sister. She is the child who possesses the puppet, thus making her the Dayshift at Freddy's equivalent to Charlotte Emily from FNAF. She is 6 years old, with her murder actually occurring on her 6th birthday. She is also one of my favorite characters from the series, but that's not entirely relevant right now, but you'll soon figure out why I consider her one of my favorite characters. To start off with, the timeline, as it relates to Dee anyway. Dee lives a somewhat normal life, mostly due to the fact that her parents died when she was little. She hardly remembers this, however, due to it happening sometime between when she was an infant to when she was a young toddler, pretty much. She is raised by her 2 older brothers, Jack and Peter. Peter eventually moves out, likely to get married and start his own life, but he still keeps in touch. After this, Jack is left to care for her, and everything seems to be going pretty well. That is, until her 6th birthday on June 23rd of 1973. Where she is murdered by 2 men by the name of Henry Miller and William Afton. We will discuss this in more detail later. Over the next few days, Dee is said to have haunted the restaurant, the diner, because she died at Fredbear's Family Diner, forgot to mention that, sorry. And Jack, most likely after coming to look for her, ends up dying and getting revived. Sometime at around this point, Dee is forced to possess the puppet by Henry. From this point up until around sometime in 1983, she does her best to save the kids that Henry kills and potentially some that William kills. And it is implied that she's also stuck within the diner. Not entirely, given that she seems to have the ability to be able to astral project. I don't know what better term to use here for that. Basically, she can sort of teleport-ish herself to other restaurants without kind of actually being there herself. It's weird, I'm not going to go too far into that. However, on Halloween of 1983, Henry dies / gets dragged into the void. A very complicated thing. Might make a video going into more detail about that. And Fredbear's closes, and Dee is no longer stuck within the diner, but where exactly she goes from this point up until around Dayshift Phrase 2 is not exactly clear. Fast forward about 4 years, and it's 1987. And her brother Jack returns to a Freddy's location in Colorado to again help with saving the kids' souls. That or he kills some kids. Depends on the route you're going down here. The events of the game play out, whether it's the good route where you free the souls or the bad route where you've killed some kids and then go to Vegas with Dave, who, fun fact, is William Afton, but that's a whole complicated thing we're not getting into this video. And then after that, for the next few months, Dee, we don't know what's going on with her. She's just kind of around, I guess. And then the second game starts later that year in November. Fun fact. The first game happens in June of 1987, with the first day of the game taking place on June 23rd of 1987. The date that, had she lived, Dee would have turned 20. But now it's November, late November, I believe. And we are now in Dayshift of Freddy's 2, where the same thing kind of plays out. Except this time, Dee is now physically in the building with Jack. And they either work together, or, Jack kills some kids. And if you go down a particular route, particular version of the bad route, Jack gets concerning. We're just going to put it that way. And then once again, Dee is just left to do her own thing until the events of the next game. Dayshift at Freddy's 3 happens in 2023. So, quite a few years have passed by this point. And Dee is now in a realm known as the flip side, basically a place between life and death, pretty much. It's sort of like limbo, purgatory, kinda, I don't know. Basically, souls just kind of end up coming here eventually. And Dee has been here for who knows how long at this point. Upon meeting her in the flip side, because, well, Dave is now trying to, atone for his crimes, pretty much, and decides to help Jack free the rest of the remaining souls, including those of his family, Dee and Peter. However, when you meet Dee, due to the fact that you have Dave with you, she becomes hostile almost instantly, and then fights you two. This is a fight that, from what I've heard, is basically unwinnable. You can't beat her in this. And then, depending on if you decide to attempt to run away mid-fight, or if you just get defeated, then Dee's dialogue changes a bit, but either way, Dave realizes who she is, realizes that this is a kid he helped to kill, and we learn some backstory from both Dave and Dee. After this, Jack returns to the living world, where between this time and next time is where your choice of what route you want to go down happens. You can either continue to choose to go down the good route, continue to go further into the flip side and helping Dave and Dee save the rest of the souls, fight Henry, and then you all get freed. Or you can choose to go down the bad route, which, if you have gone into the flip side and go down the bad route, you basically betray Dee and Dave, but we'll get into that later. Basically, depending on the route you go down, Dee will either finally be set free and is allowed to pass on into the afterlife fully, or she is destroyed, as Dave puts it. Whether that means she is basically somehow been killed twice, or if it just put her into a coma-like state. I don't think the game ever really explains, but I think it's implied that she's meant to be dead now. I don't know, it's complicated. But anyway, that's the plot of the game as it relates to Dee, and is a very short summary of everything that happens. So you might remember how I mentioned earlier that I was going to go into a bit more detail about the day that Dee was murdered. So what happened the day that Dee died? Also known as, I decided to overanalyze about every detail we got about the day that Dee was murdered to try and give us a sort of more clearer picture of what might have actually happened that day. To start off with, I'm going to give a very quick explanation of my interpretation of a cutscene in the third game that I've seen described two different ways, either as the losing Dee cutscene or the Dee's birthday cutscene. I'm going to show some images on screen, but basically, in this cutscene, it shows Jack's perspective of the day that Dee died. Now, how I believe that this cutscene is meant to be interpreted is that basically Jack had abandoned Dee at the diner, went to go get drunk for the rest of the evening, and by the time he returned much later that night, Dee had already been murdered, and he feels regret for all that happening. However, I got a bit of a different interpretation out of that scene, so allow me to just give the quickest summary I can here. So between this scene here and this scene here, there's a bit of a few-hour time skip, where I believe Jack could have been at work or potentially doing something else, maybe related to work, maybe he had to talk to someone, maybe it was an important meeting, I don't know. But the reason I think this is because Jack canonically had to work to help support Dee. And so after hearing that, that's just what I thought was going on here. This was a few-hour time skip. And then, of course, Jack returns later that evening to go pick Dee up from the diner, discovers she's missing, and then the rest of the cutscene actually takes place during the 1 to 2 days after Dee's murder, where Jack was likely not taking things well, coping by drinking a lot, and then decided to get a job at the diner as a night guard to potentially find her. So there's the very short version of my interpretation of that whole cutscene there. This is going to be important for later, I promise, because it'll explain how I view this entire thing as having happened. So now we've got that out of the way, let me lay out the details we know besides that. There is a cutscene between Henry and Dave from the second game, in a sort of very hard to get cutscene. I can't remember exactly how you get this, but it's basically the two of them talking, presumably before Dee's murder. And during this, Henry tells Dave that there is a third child that he's wanting to kill, with Dave pointing out to him that they don't have a third robot to put her in for her soul to sort of connect itself to. Henry doesn't seem to care and basically says that they're going to kill her anyway. And upon Dave asking why Henry can't just do this himself, to quote him, "She keeps struggling." So yeah, basically Henry got Dave's help because Dee was fighting back a little bit too much, but we'll elaborate on that a bit later. So we've got that, right? And Dee herself even mentions later in the third game, as she puts it, "I didn't go down easily the first time either." So, fun details there. Dee, as she says in the third game, says that her death wasn't a clean death. Not sure exactly what that means, but, important detail, probably saying, her death was real bad, things were real bad. I'm also going to put another fun quote here that, I'll just let this one speak for itself. I have the sneaking suspicion that it was definitely not a fun time, and it was probably, really, really bad. So there's that, right? We have another detail that Dee was dropped off at her party by Jack, as mentioned earlier, either because A, he was going to go get drunk, potentially the canon explanation of how you're supposed to interpret that cutscene, or B, my interpretation, he was going to go work another job and just couldn't stay there for her as much as he might have wanted to. Dee began to cause problems as a ghost, good for her in my opinion, given what happened to her, and of course, Jack got a new job as a night guard soon after Dee's quote-unquote disappearance. So with all those details laid down, let me give the best timeline I can for what I believe happened the day that Dee was murdered. And probably the best guess I can give for what might have happened that day. Jack dropped Dee off to go to work at another job he had to support her, probably believing everything was going to be fine because, hey, it's a place for kids, what could possibly go wrong? Dee is either lured to the back, which is likely a safe room, or is abducted and taken back there. It's never really specified what happened, but personally, given how Dee seems, I'd say maybe she was probably abducted and taken back there. I'll get to why I think that later, but there's that. Dee, however, fights back against Henry, who was originally, as the cutscene again implies, probably intended to do this alone without Dave's help, but she was fighting back too much, and so he went to go get Dave's help to, in my own interpretation of what's said in that cutscene, to basically hold her still, because, just look at the dialogue. I don't really have words to explain what I mean here, but just look at it here. Dave is of course reluctant to assist with this, but does anyway. Dee potentially keeps fighting back some more. Dee keeps fighting back some more during this, and ends up getting murdered. Jack returns later that evening, finds Dee missing, does not react well, that whole thing. Dee causes problems for Henry and Dave, again, good for her, by lifting things off of tables, moving things around, telling customers about what Henry and Dave had done, etc., etc. Jack returns to the night guard a day or two afterwards, likely to try and find her, and he ends up dying by getting spring-locked inside of Fredbear. He comes back due to the real Fredbear. That's an entire thing I'm not going to explain here. Just, that's a whole thing. And Dee's soul, around this time, is put inside the puppet somehow. I don't think the games ever really fully explain how this was done. It just kind of was done somehow. And with all this, I feel like we don't talk enough about the fact that Dee not only caused problems as a ghost, enough so that Henry decided, yeah, we need to put her soul inside a robot so she can't cause any more problems. She fought back when she was murdered, like enough so to where Henry apparently had to go get help. She wasn't joking around with Dave when she said that she didn't go down easily the first time. Like, just, why do we not talk about this more? Like, this is like mentioned twice as being a thing. Names. This girl was like 6 years old, and apparently she was fighting back hard enough that Henry was like, yep, can't do this by myself, gotta go get help or something. So now, what do I think Dee's personality is? Well, she's pretty tough, obviously. I mean, again, she fought back. Again, caused problems as a ghost. I'd like to think she's a pretty sweet kid, given that she's still trying to save all the kids, despite I don't think that sort of role, if you will, ever being technically given to her. It's just something she chose to do, I guess. It's just, really sweet of her. Shouldn't have had to have done that, but, still did, so pretty sweet kid. And I'd also say that Dee is pretty smart. Like, just... I don't know how to, explain this here, but, Dee just seems very smart. Like... She knows that Dave and Jack being around each other and working together as a pair is usually something that ends bad for, everyone. She understands, despite being 6 years old, that her brothers had to work a lot. And, as much as she probably, felt sad by the fact that she couldn't spend a whole lot of time with her brothers, it seems like she understands that it was a thing that they had to do. Whether this was something she already understood, whether this was something she already understood or only started understanding after she was killed, I don't know, but she is smart for a 6-year-old. I can't think of a lot of examples off the top of my head, but that's a smart kid. So now to get to a part that's going to take a bit of me explaining things. So for those of y'all who have played the games, in the good route of the third game, at the end, you have a final boss fight with Henry. As you go through the fight, Henry will occasionally just stop the battle with dialogue, just mid-battle, and will just start basically insulting everyone pretty much, and just pointing out what I can best describe as probably being their insecurities. But he always mentions these really major ones that I think just are very deep ones that you know what I'm saying? And the second he, just, I guess, reopens those old wounds, it just sort of instantly defeats whatever character he's talking to. With Steven, it relates to his death. With Peter, it's the fact that he feels like he wasn't a good older brother, how he feels probably a lot of guilt for what happened to Dee and Jack. With Dave, it's the fact that he's trying to redeem himself, but has still, killed a lot of kids. Stuff along those lines. So, of course, because I don't know a better way how to phrase this question, because I don't know how I would word this, what it would be called in the game. What was Dee's insecurity? What exactly was the thing that Henry had said that had, dug so deep that it instantly defeated her? In my personal opinion, it is likely the fact that she was murdered to begin with, given that that's something that Henry seemed to place a bit more emphasis on when he pointed out Henry points out that Dee wasn't able to escape him, as he puts it, at the diner that day. He basically says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, you couldn't escape me then, and you certainly can't now, and then that's the thing that does it. That's what finally defeats her, what, just kills her instantly. And so, basically to me, from what I can see, it seems like it was the fact that she died at all and wasn't able to get away from Henry. This is another thing that I think could point to my idea that Dee hadn't been lured to the back. She had basically been abducted and taken back there, probably like grabbed onto her and just dragged her away to where like nobody could like see her or something. Here's another Dee personality interpretation. Like I said, seems like a pretty smart kid. Perhaps would probably be described as mature for her age or something. Like, my thing is that, like, maybe she beats herself up for getting killed, like, whether she was lured back there or had gotten abducted. Like, basically, all in all, maybe she, in a sense, blames herself for her murder in a way. Like, Dee seems like she understands what stranger danger is. You know what I mean? Like, maybe to her it doesn't matter, like, she might have been forcefully taken back there. In her eyes, she's like, I should have done something, maybe, like, I should have, like, fought back harder, should have done something else. Like, you get what I mean? You get what I mean with that? Like, it just, that whole thing just messes me up. Yeah, my poor girl. Dee has gone through so much, this poor kid. And now, for the various other miscellaneous points that, didn't really fit into another section and just are their own little mini discussions. So, to go along with the last one, Dee is one of the characters that Henry never refers to by name during his fight, the other ones being Peter and Blackjack. Blackjack he refers to as simply as Mutt, and Peter is just the other phone-headed guy here. And Dee is, of course, the sock puppet in the room, as he calls her. Dee is just, he doesn't even refer to her by her name. Like, just, Henry. Dude. Anyway, moving on from that before I think about that too hard. Second point, Dee technically never forgave Dave for what he did to her, even if she seems willing to let him help free the souls. I looked this up, and this is a thing. Accepting an apology does not equal forgiveness necessarily. Like, Dee might understand that Dave is sorry, that he's truly trying to redeem himself for what he had done. But, like, reminder, this guy still, at the very least, assisted with her murder. If not, helped directly with it. Like, it doesn't matter if he was, like, perhaps just helping Henry, like, restrain her or hold her down. It doesn't matter. In her eyes, he's still involved with that. He's still one of the two men that killed her. He's still killed countless other kids of whom she's had to save. To Dee, I've always viewed it more as, like, a sort of, I understand that, like, you feel bad about what you did, and I'm glad that you're deciding to redeem yourself now, but, like, you still killed me. You still killed all these other kids. You still took this from all of us. We can't grow up because of what you've done. You know what I mean? Like, just, I know a lot of people say the whole thing of, like, oh, it seems like Dee was, like, forced to forgive Dave. That's never really the vibes I got, to be perfectly honest with y'all. It was always more like, it felt like she understood, like, again, the whole, she accepted the apology, but she doesn't necessarily forgive him for what happened. At least that's how I've personally taken it. Right? Okay, Dee needs therapy. Like, a lot of it. Like, let me just list off a few things here. This girl's parents died when she was really young, like, before she could even remember them. She likely has no memories of her parents at all. Her brothers had to work a lot of the time, which probably left her pretty lonely a lot of the time. Like, obviously I don't think, like, Jack or Peter would leave her entirely alone, but, like, she still didn't get to see her brothers a whole lot. That probably still, messed her up a bit. Do I need to mention the murder? I think I explained earlier why I think that, like, the whole murder thing probably messed her up real bad, besides the fact, just that she was killed. She basically has had to witness a whole lot of deaths and just utter tragedy at the Freddy's restaurants over the years. Like, who knows what this poor kid has seen? She has probably seen a lot. Let's see, like, this includes, like, kids dying, adults dying, doesn't matter, she has seen so much. Dee has potentially had to kill people herself, because she does so in the second game, either if you forget to keep the music box wound, or, there's an ending where she'll pretty much bite you and then kill you that way, in one variation of the evil route in the second game. Like, Dee likely has potentially killed people before, or has had to, like, try to get violent to protect someone before. So that probably does a lot to a 6-year-old. Because again, I must reiterate, this kid was 6 years old. 6. Let's see. If we're going by the evil routes, had to witness one of her brothers just kill a bunch of kids with one of the guys who killed her. So there's that whole thing. If you end up betraying Dee in the third game, and if the destroying her thing technically doesn't kill her, then, like, as in kill her, like, she's still there, just broken, basically, then, like, there's that whole thing. You got the Henry fight. There's a lot. Like, this kid, Dee has been through a lot. Like, just so much. And this then brings me to my next point, which is just what I like to call the utter tragedy of Dee, which is just, I'm going to put some of her lines on screen I think better explains this point than I can. But basically, like, we don't know what she would have been like as an adult. She probably hadn't even started kindergarten yet, because just from my personal experience, kindergarten is like 5 to 6. And she died towards the beginning of, like, what would have been summer vacation. For all we know, she hadn't even gone to school yet. And she's not going to get the chance to. It's just, she's never going to get to grow up. She's never going to get to have a life of her own. She's had to be stuck here, pretty much just helping to free and save the souls of the other kids that have been killed. Like, that's just tragic. Just, this poor kid. And then finally, so I know I've been mentioning the evil route, but in the third game, and sometimes in the second game, but mostly the third one, the evil route is sometimes, I think, called the legacy route. And there's a reason for that, because the term legacy is used a whole lot. But in the third game, there's a version of the third route that you can basically go down, like the legacy route you can go down, where you can choose to betray Dave and Dee in the flip side by killing a kid with Dave Trap. No, for the people who don't understand Dayshift phrase, I'm sorry, I cannot. It's Dave Springtrap, that's all you need to know. Yes, there are 2 Daves. It's complicated, man. But basically, you kill a kid with Dave Trap, you go back to the flip side, and Dave calls you out for doing that. And Dee is just, she's utterly betrayed by what you've done. She's like, how could you do this? I trusted you. Meanwhile, Dave is still yelling at you for doing what you've done. Still yelling at you like, oh, I can't even, like, get the words out. It's like, basically, after this point, Dave and Dee decide to fight you. And Dee herself even says that she can't believe she's fighting alongside Dave, who, keep in mind, she only became basically neutral with, like, a month prior, the last time you were here. Like, they only came to, like, a truce, like, a month ago. And Dave basically tells her that to not think of it as, like, she's fighting alongside him, that they're just fighting against Jack, and they just happen to be on the same team here. During this fight, you're advised not to attack Dave because he's too strong, but you can attack Dee first, because she's weaker. And keep in mind, you're playing as Jack, you're playing as her older brother. Dee is getting fought by her own brother, the guy who originally went back to the diner to try and look for her. The guy who had at one point been so distraught by her death that it basically started all of this. And now he doesn't seem to care anymore. He seems willing to fight her. All in all, I guess what I'm trying to say is, Legacy Jack, because that's what some people call him, for those who are unaware, Legacy Jack's attacks aren't what I believe destroyed Dee, because usually no matter what you do in, like, the original fight with Dee, you can't really win. There's no way to win against her in that fight. His attacks aren't what destroyed Dee, in my opinion. It's the fact that her own brother was fighting her that destroyed her. And it's just, one day I'm going to do a video on the legacy route and all the ways that I think it messes me up, because there's a lot there. Trust me, there's a whole lot. But I think I'm just going to stop there for right now, because thinking about the Dee and Dave fight in that route just makes me sad. And so those are all the main points of this I have, but if it weren't obvious, Dee is one of my favorite characters and I love her a lot. Love her humor. Just great kid. Wonderful. Also love the design of her before she died. And just, I wish we could have like gotten an idea of what she could have been like as an adult. Wonderful kid. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but like just genuinely lovely kid. Just all in all, Dee Kennedy, my absolute beloved. And that's basically the video, guys. Just sorry if this video seems a bit disorganized, but thank you for coming to my TED Talk, y'all.